بسم الله الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على رسوله الكريم وعلى آله وصحبه ومن تبع سنته إلى يوم الدين. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome again to another episode of your weekly Islamic discussion show, Live by Islam. I'm your host ISMAIL Bullock, and today we want to talk about something, inshallah, that should be, well, not necessarily, but is relevant to many of us, which is the Muslim family, the importance of the family in Islam, and how Islam views the family, and how Islam tells us how families should be, inshallah. We'll try to give justice in the next 20 to 25 minutes, if we can, inshallah, to the best of our ability. And to do that with me is brother Almir. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah.
Now, obviously, many of us have a Muslim family, whether we be from a Muslim family or we have married and had children and therefore have our own Muslim family. So we want to discuss, why it's important to have a family. And I think we could probably start off just discussing how we see around the world where there isn't the family structure in society and there are broken families, how it has a very negative impact on society in general.
Yes. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen wa salatu wa salam ala Rasulullah Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Thanks for inviting me again to the show. And yes, you're right about the impact of or lack of family or structure of family, what does to a society, and so many problems that it brings with. Subhanallah, this is happening all over the world. We are not immune in our Muslim countries from that. Breaking of family structure is happening everywhere. But I'll give you, like we said, I'll give you a couple of statistics that you can find online actually. And for example, we'll take an example of United States of America. Because it's such a large country and a lot of problems are emphasized because, some of the problems really look big because it's a big country, lots of population. And for example, the lack of a father who's around the family, what can bring to the children, for example. And they would say, like, I remember back many years ago where they had ads running by a non-profit organization to bring about betterment of the family, you could say. And they would say things like, a father who's not present in the life of his son, for example, that son is 50 or 67% more likely to use a gun or a knife in a fight in a high school. Bro, we're talking about high school. We're not talking about an adult already. We're talking about juvenile who is in high school as a 14, 15, 16-year-old that already, if he is in fight, he would be thinking of using a knife and a gun. Unbelievable, right? But yes, it is there. Or they say 3 times as likely to use drugs, be it as small as smoking, but I don't think they consider it drug smoking. I would say more like marijuana and cocaine and all those bad things, right? Or commit suicide. Twice as likely to commit suicide. And another statistic that would say they are so many percent less likely to graduate from a high school, let alone university, and so on and so forth. Yes, we all hear about those single mothers who raise their children and success stories. SubhanAllah, yes, they are there, but you have to think of all those who did not.
And I think a lot of it is because it's natural, especially when it comes to boys as well, that they look for that male role model. And if the father is absent and they don't find another suitable, they look to the older boys. That's why you see a lot of these boys, sometimes they go with a bad gang or a bad crowd because they're looking for someone who's older than them to take that role of the father. And when the father's not there, a lot of the time, and there's not other family members like older brothers or maybe an uncle or someone who can take that position, then they tend to just grab onto people on the street. Yes. Or people with bad habits so they can fall into it.
Everyone at the end wants acceptance, right? So the teenagers, the kids, the children, everybody wants acceptance. Everybody needs a role model to look up to. I mean, one of the funniest things is your 4-year-old daughter tells you, oh, Baba, you know everything. Or Baba, you're like this. You don't know everything. And I told her, my daughter tells me that. But because she doesn't know many people like me, because I'm at home all the time, or whatever questions she asks me, and those are simple questions, you answer, right? So she thinks of you as like you know everything. And I tell her, no, no, a lot of people know this, it's not just me. And subhanAllah, for the kids like this is what they need, a role model. They need to be accepted, they need to be loved, they need to be appreciated. And they said, you know what, you're cool, you're fine. So, like you said, if you don't have older brothers to be that role for you, you end up being in a gang, because this gives you acceptance, this gives you a purpose, of course. So the ultimate purpose, of course, is to be slave to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But we also understand that in a society, sometimes the dynamic is a little bit different depending where you live. And the peer pressure is great. So if certain currents in the peer pressure, for example, you could say certain crowd is gearing for this and you're not being accepted, it hurts, right? And then you want to be accepted. So you would do things to be accepted. Those things may be good, may be bad. So the family structure is very important. The father structure needs to be there. And at the same time, the motherly love also. We cannot lessen the impact of both. Because imagine if a father brings his children and there's no mother also, this part will be also missing greatly. And we know the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, when he was asked, who do I take care of more, or who's more important to me? And then the Prophet ﷺ says, your mother. Then the person said, who next? Your mother. Who next? Your mother. And then the father is the fourth.
I mean, and the verse, قَضَى رَبُّكَ أَنْ لَا تَعْبُدُوا إِلَّا إِيَّاهُ وَبِالْوَالِدَيْنِ إِحْسَانًا. Your Lord prescribed that you worship Him only and no one else with Him, and that you do your good, or you are good with your parents. So this is part of the Muslim family, obviously, is the parents and the status that's given to the parents. Or we could do a whole episode on that. But the status given to the parents is very high. The fact that after committing shirk, worshipping someone alongside Allah, one of the gravest sins you can do is to be bad to your parents. And there's another hadith that the Prophet ﷺ said, رضاء الرب في رضاء الوالدين وسخط الرب في سخط الوالدين. That the happiness or the pleasing or the pleasure of your Lord lies in the pleasure of your parents, and the anger of your Lord lies in the anger of your parents. And obviously we're talking about here, if your parents are angry with you, you're trying to be a good Muslim, or you're trying to do something very good and they want you to do something bad. That's what we're talking about here. We're talking about you've done something wrong to your parents and they are angry with you. Allah is angry. And every time you do good things that make your parents happy.
We know the hadith also, the Prophet ﷺ says, said that the dua of three kinds of people is accepted by Allah. One of them is being the one who has oppression done upon the oppressed, his dua is accepted. And the father for his child is another one. So it's very important that the father should make the dua for his child to raise him, to give him Jannah, to give him of the good things, you know what I'm saying? But if you said, like you said, if the father is angry with his child and making dua like this, it's not good. Not that we say you should make dua. No, don't make dua like this. Because even there is ulama talk about this, there's a book written about this, how the parent should not make dua like this for his child. Even though this child may become a trial and tribulation for such a parent, but he should abstain from this because of the power of the dua of the father. Right? Because even though you have right maybe to make dua, but Allah may accept it because you're the father, right? And we know that the dua of the father is accepted. Then later on you may regret it and it will be too late. So we have to be careful. You know, like you said, we could go on and on and on, talk about how much parents have rights over their children, but also the children have rights over the parents. And sometimes that gets put on the side and we don't talk about it much. It's like a taboo topic. It's like you go to the malls, you go to places, and mashallah, some of us have big families and so on, but we let other people raise our children, and we say, let them raise them, or school is doing raising. No, school is supposed to educate your children, supposed to teach you math and science and you know, physics and biology and in English or Arabic or whatever, right? Those are the subjects. But the manners, all of these things, other should be learning at home. The school is not for that. So you have to, just because Allah has given you kids doesn't mean just, you know what, Allah will take care of them. This is wrong, ya akhi. This is wrong.
And on that point, we'll just go for a quick break. Join us, inshallah, after this break. Assalamu alaikum and welcome back. One thing that mentions, we've got about 6 minutes left in the show, but one thing that came to my mind was you mentioned how we should teach the children, and the hadith of Prophet ﷺ came to my mind was كلكم راع وكلكم مسؤول عن رعيته. You know, that all of you are like shepherds or guardians or in charge of your flock, and each of you will be asked about your flock or who are those responsible. And obviously that can go under the manager at work. It can go in many different, anybody who you're in charge of, you'll be asked by Allah, did you treat them properly? Did you teach them what they knew? Did you fulfill your responsibilities? But obviously we're more so with the children. So we are, you know, the wife, the children, they're under, you could say, the responsibility of the father, and they you know, we will be asked about our children. Did we teach them right or wrong? Did we teach them the basics of aqeedah? Did we teach them the basics of their salah, of their wudu? At least the very basics. Did we try to get, at least they get a few surahs, you know, at least something, you know, that we're going to be asked, did we at least do the very minimum for our children? And that's obviously generally when we're going to be asked, did we treat them correctly? Did we speak to them nicely? Did we feed them and clothe them properly? Or did we waste our money on sports cars, for example, and our children are wearing rags? So all of these things will be asked for. And the verse that comes to mind is where Allah says, قُوا أَنفُسَكُمْ وَأَهْلِكُمْ نَارًا. You know, save yourselves and your family from the hellfire. وَقُودُهَا النَّاسُ وَالْحِجَارَةِ. That, you know, which fuel is men and stone, coal, you know, men. So this is something that's, you know, it's quite clear there that the Prophet ﷺ and Allah is telling us, you are responsible for your family, for your children.
The hadith you mentioned is actually, I think it's mentioned in Bukhari and Muslim, and it's a lengthy hadith. And to just quickly, all of you are guardians and all of you are responsible for your wards. An imam is a guardian of his jama'ah, of his, you could say, jama'ah or community that he is in. And he's responsible for his people. A man is a guardian of his family, is responsible for his flock, which means his family, right? And lady is a guardian of her husband's house, and she's responsible for charges and so on. So the hadith, like you said, continues on and on. Meaning that, just we talked about before the break, Allah has given you a blessing, which is the kids. It could be also fitna for you, right? So Allah has given you a blessing, which is the kids, the family. And that doesn't mean just you just feed them and let them be on their way. No. Let them be like sheep. You know, what do we do with the sheep? We just make sure they have enough food and just let them do whatever else, right? This is not the case with the children. They need to be nurtured, they need to be taken care of, they need to be guided, they need to be properly trained for things, for real life situations, for example. You know, I tell my kids always, subhanAllah, like, ideally, this is how we should be acting, like we do in family, polite, being nice, always, you know, using good manners and everything. But we also tell them, look, you have to expect that not everybody's going to be nice, right? You have to also know that real life is a little bit different. There's a cutthroat world out there in a lot of places, and the way that things work. But that means also you maintain your dignity, but at the same time, you need to reflect these things off of you, so they don't affect you as much. Because real life is different than the life at home, correct? Mm-hmm. And you know, all those things, you have to prepare them. So not just having the kids for the sake of having kids, you have to be there for them in many aspects of their lives.
One statement comes to my mind, I believe it was of a saying of Ali radiallahu anhu, and he said that with regards to your children, he said, let the first 7 years you play with your children, and then the next 7 years you teach them and educate them, and the next 7 years you be their friend. So you can see, subhanAllah, the first 7 years, or those first few years, the child's in a very playful. Play with them, be like you should be with a child. And then you have the next 7 years, where they're a bit more understanding now, like the age 7 to 14 is a very good place to, where they can understand more of what you're teaching them, etc. And then you look after that, from 14 to like 21 is a very emotional, very hormonal time. And rather than being the boss, it's better for you, it might not always be that easy, to be their friend. So then they will come to you. They won't always look at you as the one who's going to have a go at them and punish them, but they will look at you as a friend, and they may turn to you and share their problems. They may turn to you and ask for advice. Whereas if you still are being more like the teacher to them, as you were in the previous years, when you're teaching them wrong and right, and trying to emphasize on them reward and punishment, for example, they may find it harder to come to you and then go elsewhere, or not come to you with their doubts or with their worries or with their fears. So that's quite a very wise statement there, you know.
Oh no, for sure. Subhanallah, Ali was, subhanallah, stuff like this, like you said, it's amazing, and it's so true. Even the children's psychologists nowadays, they talk about this. And this is done by scientific reasoning, scientific research. Studies have been done talking about exactly what you're talking about. Being a peer to your teenager son. Being a peer, what does it mean? We just mentioned it earlier, peer pressure is so detrimental to our children's being, that the peers, their peers in schools, whoever else, they're the ones leading their lives, meaning that they look up to them and so on. So one of the children's psychologists that, you know, I've read about from him, he says, be a peer to your child, meaning that be a friend to your child. Let the child look up to you. Right? Who do you look up to? You look up to friends. You don't look up to your boss. I mean, you do look up to your boss, but it's more like you look up to him, just stay out of his way, not to bother him, right? But who do you look up to is your friend or role model. So be that role model for your children, for your child. Therefore, you will succeed.
We've probably only got like 2 or 3 minutes left, but something we must end on as well, since we've spoken about parents, we've spoken about children, is the wives. We know that Prophet ﷺ said, خيركم خيركم لأهلي وأنا خيركم لأهلي. The best of you is the one who is best to his wife, and I am the best of you to my wives. So here is an emphasis. And even the Prophet ﷺ, he advised, you know, to be good in his final sermon, to be good to the women. And the Prophet ﷺ himself would even, Aisha used to talk about how he would come and sew his own clothes. So he would assist his wives. I have a lot of people now who
self-sufficient
speak to their wives as if they own them in a way. Or they speak to their wife, they never help their wives in any household chores, helping them with the children, in any way whatsoever. We see from the life of the Prophet ﷺ, he actively took part in some of those tasks and helped his wives and was respectful to his wives. But you know, we hear that Prophet ﷺ, you know, never.
Let me give you a hypothetical example. Okay. Right now, you go out and you meet your friends or whatever. You're eating dinner. Your male friends. You know, you have a boys' night out, and you say to your friend, and you tell him, "Listen, man, how is the help at home? How is it? Was the washing the dishes good for you?" You know, and imagine that friend you hear you say this, that you're washing dishes at home, and you're like embarrassed, right? You're embarrassed, like, why would you say stuff like that? Sometimes you would even deny it, like, oh no, I ain't doing that. Meanwhile, maybe you're doing it, right? Well, guess what? The Prophet ﷺ did that. The Prophet ﷺ helped with the house chores. He helped Aisha radiallahu anha and his other wives in house chores. Be it washing dishes, cleaning the house, sweeping the floors, like you said, sewing his own clothes, doing all those little things that we think of as nothing. And go back to another thing is being merciful to his children, kissing them, hugging them, taking care of them. Subhanallah.
I mean, just to end on this part, is that we know there was the hadith where a Bedouin man came to the Prophet ﷺ and said to him, "You kiss your children?" And he said, "We never kiss our children." And the Prophet ﷺ said to him, "What can I do for someone who Allah has removed the mercy from his heart?" Meaning, where's the mercy and the kindness if you don't even kiss your own children? Anyway, mashallah, again, it's one of those topics we could go on
and on.
Obviously, This is a chat show, not a lecture as such, so we can't go on for hours.
And you know what? There's so many other examples we didn't mention. There's so many things and tangents we didn't touch upon, so we apologize. We're limited with time, but...
Jazakallah khair for coming on. And again, for the viewers, as always, we thank you. May Allah reward you all for tuning in. And inshallah, until the same time, same place, bi'idhnillah, by the will of Allah, next week inshallah, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.